Robinson's mother explained that over the last year or so, Robinson had become more political and had started to lean more to the left, becoming more pro-gay and trans rights oriented. She stated that Robinson began to date his roommate, a biological male who was transitioning genders. This resulted in several discussions with family members, but especially between Robinson and his father, who have very different political views. In one conversation before the shooting, Robinson mentioned that Charlie Kirk would be holding an event at UVU, which Robinson said was a stupid venue for the event. Robinson accused Kirk of spreading hate.
Meanwhile,
haven't seen yet, though, and which hasn't been released, is a real clear-cut ideology behind this. It looks like it may be leaning towards, perhaps something related to, gay community or trans community, but I mean, there's nothing necessarily here. He talks about his father being more pro-Trump, but is that because he's reacting to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, or is he acting out against his father's affiliation with MAGA world? So I don't think we see a real clear-cut ideology here.
It seems like he had a roommate that loved each other, that had some sort of relationship in that way. He seemed like he was on Discord with friends. All of his high school, the reporting about his high school and people who knew him said he was not an outcast. He was pretty funny. This doesn't really quite fit into that category yet. I think there are so many unanswered questions.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to talk about the stages of denial in the copium overdose that is currently happening in the mainstream liberal media, as local prosecutors in Utah, along with FBI, have stated that Charlie Kirk's assassin was, in fact, far left, and he was motivated by his hatred of Charlie Kirk's speech, that this was political, and again, he did it mainly because of his ideology, right? This was, again, a political assassination. Now, again, this is the last thing that the mainstream liberal media wants to hear, because at this point, they're not living in reality, okay? They're not living in reality when it comes to the motivations of the shooter. They're also not living in reality of the fact that leftists and liberals are online celebrating the assassination as well, too, while also claiming that their side had nothing to do with it. But yet, again, they're celebrating it as if it's a holiday. But apparently the experts, propagandists on MSNBC, aka BS Now, they don't know that.
Discuss violence, anything?
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot. I think that there are corners of the internet where people, like you said really well, flatten people into characters. And there are people that are saying no love lost for Charlie Kirk. It's just, that is more rare, I think, than the outpouring of people who've said, we do not want this kind of violence. That is not, like, seeing Charlie's murder was really traumatizing, I think, for a lot of us who are in this space all the time. And what my little verklempt right now, I think, is what we're seeing a lot, is that it's been a very traumatic week for people. I think that there has been no time to sit and think about that grief and unite in that grief, because apart from Governor Cox, no one has really been talking like that. No one has really been trying to unify. We haven't had a forum to see those other sides. But I think if you look across media generally, you have seen a lot of people trying to grapple with Charlie Kirk's legacy and what that is as a right-wing agitator and as a provocateur and as, a strategist of the most important GOP figure besides Donald Trump, arguably ever. Or right now. And so there's a lot of grappling to do, but to suggest that the internet is cheering for this is just the opposite, total opposite of what's actually happening.
Wow. Really living up to the new nickname, right? BS Now is literally what you get as soon as you turn on MSNBC, right? I mean, come on. I mean, seriously, they apparently don't see far leftists celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk. All you got to do is just, open up TikTok, okay? And you can see it on the front page, right? That's what I see when I open up TikTok. for the most part, is people celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk, mainly liberals who are flooding that app with their excitement, their celebration over the assassination of Charlie Kirk, right? So apparently the mainstream liberal media doesn't know that. They also apparently still don't know the motivation, even though the FBI said what the motivation was. The local prosecutors in Utah said what the motivation was. We have text message exchanges that basically give us a good insight into what the motive was. It all makes sense. But for whatever reason on CNN, they're still grappling with the motive. And Scott Jennings had zero patience today for the gaslighting from this liberal panel on CNN, pretending as if they don't understand why this assassination occurred. Take a look.
When you foment the idea that we have to be at each other's throats politically, I think that's a dangerous place to be.
Why did I do it? I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out.
So can I ask you? So
he has
Scott, just explain what you just read.
That is the message that the shooter, Tyler Robinson, sent to his roommate. That is what he said. He also engraved the word, "Hey, fascist, catch," on the bullet. For 10 years, we have heard nothing from the left but that Donald Trump is a fascist, Republicans are Nazis, authoritarians, destroy the Constitution,
but that's also,
bloodbath, dictator for a day. And he wrote it on the bullet.
So can I ask you?
And he's been obviously marinating in some kind of information that radicalized him based on what he heard in the air in this country.
So does the shooter who assassinated Melissa Hortman, who was a stated Trump supporter, whose roommate said...
Are you trying to equate these two things?
I'm sorry. Can you let me finish my thought, please?
Please.
We're talking about two people in politics who both...
I'm asking you, does that shooter represent the entirety of the MAGA movement? Of course not. I would never argue that. I don't think you would argue that. So why is it acceptable to use this moment to argue that somebody, a sick individual who committed a horrific crime,
how do you know he's sick?
Is somehow... Are you here to argue for his sanity?
I'm here to argue. All I know is what the prosecutor said today. He read very lucid messages from a shooter who was motivated by political hate, who had a plan to get away with it. He did not sound like a deranged person. He sounded like someone who had decided to take it upon himself to rid the world of someone that he hated politically, that he thought that the world would be better off without that. That's different than some deranged lunatic showing up off the street.
His actions were horrific, but to assign the specific, hateful, violent, awful actions of somebody on an individual on the right or an individual on the left,
I don't know that you're right about what happened in Minnesota.
of the political conversation is incredibly dangerous and irresponsible in this moment.
Well, I think it's dangerous and irresponsible for nobody to take responsibility for 10 years of the use of the language fascism, Nazis, authoritarian, so on and so forth. It's on the bullet, Casey.
I have seen nothing but Democrats in the wake of this murder saying that it was awful.
You've seen nothing?
I have seen them
literally nothing?
Elected Democrats, I have seen them saying nothing but it was horrific, that they condemn it, that they are sorry for his family, that this is an awful moment in the country. I've seen President Trump do nothing but say it was the Democrats' fault.
Can I just jump in here for a second?
Lulu, yes, go ahead.
I just want to read the words of someone who I think is very wise in the wake of 2019 and the killing in El Paso. He wrote, "We have to stop blaming the politicians we loathe for the vile actions of the deranged, evil people who commit mass shootings." He went on to say, "But here's the thing. We should not, the rush to rage against Trump and the predictive punditry that he will inevitably fail to unite the country seems counterproductive to people who want a meaningful policy outcome. All politicians have a responsibility to ratchet down their own rhetoric and to ask their supporters to stand down as well." And that man was Scott Jennings. And so what I would say about that is those were wise words then, and they should be wise words now.
I don't disagree with any of that. What I am not happy about is that we have the shooter's words. We know what he put on the bullets. It's very, very clear what happened here. And there is a movement by some people to completely say, well, we have no idea.
Scott,
and we do.
Hold on. We have the floor. You can have the floor back. But here's the thing. I had to really struggle to understand all of the details that were on those bullets. They are internet memes from video games that people way younger than us play. Okay? There is something going on online that is merging with the real world in really strange ways. And I'm interested to know if you have grappled with that. I'm not sure it fits quite neatly. We think about the world in a certain way, right? We came up in our politics in a certain way, and now this kid's age are stewing in something different.
I am only reacting to what I have seen and heard out here for the last 8 years, which is nothing but Democrats and liberal pundits and supposed analysts assigning the word fascist to Republicans from Trump all the way down. I see a shooter who's engraved it on a bullet. I have a shooter who sent a message to his roommate,
Scott,
whatever. I've had enough of his hatred. I'm only simply suggesting that we stop looking the evidence in the face and saying,
I understand
gee whiz, what happened here?
But language has been used
we know.
On all sides. I mean, the person who have, the people who have called President Trump a Nazi was his present vice president and his present secretary of human
Health and Human Services.
Health and Human Services. So, I mean, language is a problem. There's no question. I think what everyone is reacting to here is the fear that the use of this is going to make it so that you are now targeting people who aren't involved in this at all.
Yeah. So they always say the quiet part out loud, right? We're afraid of the truth. We're afraid that the truth is going to end up backfiring on us, right? That is what this woman is saying, right? That's what she's saying. Well, don't tell the truth because the truth is dangerous, right? You can't tell the truth, right? We're concerned that you coming out here and saying that the guy is far left. That's going to put us in danger. Now, have these people ever considered that when they're out here calling everybody far right or neo-Nazis, white supremacists, white nationalists, right? Have they ever considered, hey, maybe your language is a little bit extreme, right? Maybe that's going to cause somebody to, want to do harm to you, which actually did happen, okay, multiple times, okay? But they were never concerned. Now, all of a sudden, they're just concerned about just telling the truth about the motivations of the assassin. Because as Scott Jennings outlines correctly, well, there's some agenda. There's an agenda in the media to not say what the motivations of the assassin was, right? There's an agenda. And they're clearly trying to hide it. They're clearly trying to say, well, it's impossible to say, right? We can't neatly fit it into traditional ideologies. Like, no, we can neatly fit it into the far left, right? It neatly fits in the far left. And see, here's the thing. I don't understand how you have people who are this ignorant of politics on national television discussing politics when they're admitting that, hey, we're ignorant, right? That their whole like, well, we really don't know. I don't know what those symbols mean. Well, if you don't know what those symbols mean, why the fuck are you hosting the show then? Right? Serious question. Why the hell are you hosting the show, talking about this, having this discussion if you don't know what the symbols mean? If you don't have any idea that these are Antifa symbols, which they could have easily looked up on the internet, right? I mean, come on. Does anybody believe that all these individuals didn't go and look up the meaning of Ciao Bella Ciao, and all of these individuals didn't see that clearly that is the Antifa theme song? It's not hard to find, right? It's not hard to find. With a simple Google search, you can find out what the meaning of that song is, right? But again, according to big mystery, hey, fascist catch, I don't know. He was motivated by his hatred of Charlie Kirk. Well, I don't know what that means, right? Again, it's amazing. It's amazing. But apparently they do know when it comes to situations that happen to Democrats that they use as a whataboutism, even though in the case of Melissa Hortman, the Democrat that was assassinated in Minnesota by an employee of Tim Walz, right? We don't know the motivations. In fact, that suspect explicitly said that it had nothing to do with President Trump or whether or not he supported Trump at all, right? He explicitly said it had nothing to do with that, right? But they bring this up as a whataboutism in order to deflect from actual criticism, because that's what this is, right? They're digging up her dead body, metaphorically, and they're using her dead body as a shield. a body that they didn't give a damn about before.
I am truly stunned. You just have to watch this video. Donald Trump was asked if he should have lowered the flags to half-staff for Melissa Hortman, the Democratic lawmaker who was killed in her home with her husband over the summer by a Trump supporter, and he responded by saying, "Who is that? I'm not familiar with who you're talking about." Just take a look.
Charlie Kirk, in retrospect, given all of the moving ways that this White House has paid tribute to Charlie Kirk, right, do you think it would have been fitting to lower the flags to half-staff when Melissa Hortman, the Minnesota House Speaker, was gunned down by an assassin as well?
I'm not familiar. The
Minnesota House Speaker,
what?
a Democrat, was assassinated this summer.
Well, if the governor had asked me to do that, I would have done that. But the governor of Minnesota didn't ask me. I didn't. I wouldn't have thought of that.
He had no idea who she is.
None of these MAGA influencers who claim to be so concerned about political violence actually care, because not one of them spoke about Melissa Hortman and her husband.
Neither did you, Harry. You didn't post about it. Not a single time on the day it happened, nor the 2 weeks after. You were dead silent about this for almost a month. So what the fuck are you talking about? You had no problem in your video talking about how Benny Johnson didn't talk about it. Even though he did, you accused Nick Sorter of not talking about it. You accused me of not talking about it. You went after Dave Rubin, Ben Shapiro, when the whole time you didn't talk about it. You didn't even fucking mention it. In fact, the only time you did bring up anything to do with Melissa Hortman was on June 27th and June 28th, where you didn't post about her murder. No, you made posts congratulating Joe Biden for going to her funeral. Like, think about that, Harry. The first time you ever posted about Melissa Hortman was not only 2 weeks after she was murdered, but you didn't even talk about her or her husband. You just talked about how amazing it was that Biden was at her funeral. Brother, you have to realize that if you're going to accuse people of doing something, make sure you didn't do it yourself first.
Yeah. So what we have here is performative whataboutism, right? This is what happens when Democrats can't defend the indefensible, right? So they deflect by basically saying, well, what about this? What about that? And again, the whataboutisms aren't valid whataboutisms. That's the crazy part about it. Like, again, Melissa Hortman was a Democrat. You didn't care about her. That's why people don't know who she is, because you didn't care. You weren't that outraged by it, right? You didn't make that big of a deal out of it. You didn't do it. You guys were more concerned about the No Kings protest, right? Protesting Trump than this Democrat being assassinated. That's what they cared about at the time. So now all these people come, well, what about this and what about that? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And in this clip right here, another common whataboutism that Democrats use in order to deflect away from the fact that a far leftist committed this assassination against Charlie Kirk, and that their rhetoric is responsible, is what about Josh Shapiro, right? What happened to him and his mansion being burned? Well, just like the Melissa Horton situation, this whataboutism is built on a lie. And that is what Scott Jennings is going to expose on this CNN panel. And let's just say they don't like Scott Jennings exposing the lie behind this whataboutism from Democrats and liberals.
Scott Jennings, I will note that the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, was someone who, when President Trump, somebody, was hit by a bullet in Butler, Pennsylvania, Shapiro stood up and denounced it in a clear, unequivocal way. Now he's saying we do the same thing here. Do you think that he's got a point?
Well, I think his point would be strengthened if he were honest today about who burned his house down. It was a Free Palestine leftist who came and burned down the governor's mansion.
Facts. That's exactly what it was. It's funny because they keep using that as an example. Well, violence happens to Democrats. Look at what happened to Josh Shapiro. Except the person that did that was a far leftist. They were a pro-Palestine activist. They were upset because Josh Shapiro was not far left enough on that issue, right? The issue that leftists are so passionate about that they have rioted in the streets over, right? They've committed acts of political violence over. Yeah, that issue. Yeah, that is what he had an issue with. This was not some Trump supporter attacking Josh Shapiro because he's a Democrat, right? No, this was a far leftist. But again, they leave that part out of it. They just pretend as if the person that did that was a MAGA guy, right? And they pretend, well, it's impossible. It's totally impossible for the far left to attack a Democrat. And it's like, no, that's actually much more likely than for somebody on the far right to attack somebody on the right. Like that's where the actual infighting is, right? Because the far left at this point, they basically see anybody that's not far left as far right, right? I mean, these are the same people that think that Bill Maher is right wing. They think that CNN is right wing. They think that MSNBC is right wing, right? Anybody that's not super far left is basically right wing, right? So again, this just comes from a basic understanding of how our current political spectrum works. If you don't understand that, why are you having these conversations on national television about politics when you clearly don't understand the basics? That's what really pisses me off about these panel discussions on CNN. Just a basic level of knowledge of our modern politics and the political spectrum where we're at. You should be able to analyze these situations correctly. But again, you're not seeing that. These people are basically ignorant on these topics. And it really is frustrating because they're misinforming the American people.
He left that out. He left that out of his tweet today. And he's talking about cherry-picking political violence. And we're talking about where there might be political violence. The violence against the governor of Pennsylvania and his family came from the left.
Facts.
And so I think, look, I think there's a rush by Democrats who want to be president in 2028 to try to turn, somehow Donald Trump's friend gets shot and now everybody wants to blame Donald Trump for it.
Facts.
I guess that's what you have to do to get elected president as a Democrat.
We are not doing that sitting here, okay? And Kate,
I'm
please
sorry.
go ahead.
Is that not what's happening?
The governor's point is it doesn't matter where the violence came from.
I think it might. Shouldn't it matter the motivations of the people?
It should be condemned regardless. As the entire
No, it only matters when it's somebody that is a Trump supporter, right? They only want to talk about politics when it's a Trump supporter. Again, notice how when there are mass shootings, okay, and the mass shooter is trans or black or whatever, right? When the mass shooter doesn't fit the narrative, oh, we don't want to talk about identity. But when the mass shooter fits the narrative, oh, now they want to talk about far right. They want to talk about white supremacy. They want to talk about white males. They love talking about identity. Again, you're seeing the same pattern over and over and over and over and over again. When it doesn't fit the narrative, they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about certain things when it doesn't fit the narrative. And that's what's happening here. And it's disgusting. It really is. It's despicable. They do this every single time. And then they turn around and say, well, we're not biased, right? It's like, clearly you are. This is the bias on display.
Higher point of his speech.
Don't you care about the motivation?
To sit here and suggest that somehow him not mentioning it was some sort of sleight of hand.
Of course it is.
To try to make it seem like it was.
I don't think his political party would accept it.
You missed the entire point of what he was saying, and it's a message that's badly, badly needed in this country at this moment.
Look, I think that if we cannot be honest, if I were him and somebody tried to burn my house down, I think I'd be honest about who did it and why they did it. And it would matter for people to know that, would it not?
Scott, is this not a let's rise above because anyone that is committing an act of political violence who is trying to kill someone else for what they believe in, it's like it is inherently wrong and awful.
Why are your two impulses mutually exclusive? Why can't we all say all political violence is bad, which I wholeheartedly believe, and also be honest when people have clear intentions? I think there's a difference between people that have clear intentions and, clearly deranged people. But in the case of Shapiro, and I think in the case of Charlie Kirk, we know the intentions, the political intentions of the people at play. And when we sort of skirt around it and we're not honest about it, we let it off the hook. And I don't think we should let people with clear political intentions to commit violence off the hook. And so I like what he said about condemning violence. I just would like it a little more if we could just be a little bit honest about what happened at his house.
You would just like it if a politically critical message was applied to what he was trying to say. I mean, that's what you're saying.
No, I mean, what we like to hear is the truth, right? Because, again, when the person is MAGA or far right, which doesn't happen that often, by the way. Let's be real. Like, it doesn't happen that often. But in the rare case that it does happen, these people have no issues talking about the politics of the individual, right? They have no issues with it. So again, it's just extremely frustrating to see these people play these mental gymnastics games because they don't want to admit that the shooter was far left. And see, this is what really blows my mind. If you're not far left, why do you have a problem with it? Why do you have a problem acknowledging that political violence is coming from the far left if you're not far left? Now, if I see something that happens that's far right and it's clearly far right, I have no issues calling it out because that's what it is. When the Buffalo shooting happened, I said this is an act of white supremacy, right? I don't know how else you frame what clearly is a racially motivated shooting. of a white guy going into public and then shooting up black people. Clearly, that was an act of hate, bigotry, white national, whatever you want to call it. How hard is that? It's not hard. It's not hard because I'm not out here trying to tell lies and to hide things because I'm trying to shield my side. No. If there's an act of political violence and you know the political motivations, it's clear what the political motivations were, then you need to call out for what it is. You need to tell the truth, regardless of whether it's far right or far left. But again, these people, for whatever reason, can't just admit the truth. They're very afraid of just telling the truth. It's very fascinating to watch these individuals.
Right? You're saying you like what he said in condemning political violence across the board, but it didn't work for you because you didn't try to get in a dig at whose fault it was. The entire point is that we have to condemn political violence from all sides, in all stripes, in whatever form. And I think the fact that we are sitting here even having this conversation is deeply, deeply problematic in terms of where the temperature is in the country right now. I think the fact that you would call him dishonest.
I agree that it is problematic that a prominent Democrat cannot be honest about who tried to burn his house down. I totally agree with you about that.
Cannot be honest. As if, did he misrepresent it?
He didn't mention it and has refused to say it.
I think the only person misrepresenting what he said today, Scott Jennings, is you.
No, I'm reading what he tweeted. I listened to his speech. I'm not misrepresenting anything. I'm just saying that, unless we say it out loud, how will people know?
Well, they don't want you to know. That's the point, right? The whole point is that they don't want people to acknowledge the truth. The truth is dangerous now, right? It's dangerous to tell the truth. Don't do it. The truth is divisive, according to these people. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So, yeah, I mean, the whataboutisms are not going to work, okay, because they're invalid. And at this point, there's no whataboutism comparison to what happened to Charlie Kirk. And as you can see, the liberal media, they're really struggling with the reality of how this is unfolding, okay? So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.